This program has been brought to you thanks to the generous contributions of our patrons on Patreon. Your patronage is greatly appreciated. And for more content like this, be sure to check out the Modern Alchemist channel on Patreon. Greetings, and welcome to the Modern Alchemist channel. I'm Aubrey Forrest, the Modern Alchemist, and this is Alchemy LAB RUBEDO. And we are going to be talking for the next part of our series, Practical Magic. So we're just going to be talking about it as if you were here with me in the room and I was just sharing this with you. Like, these are the principles. This is why this is a thing, okay? So in keeping with that, our Alchemy Lab is going to be centered on circles and circle magic, and why that geometry is important to learn and to understand and to how to apply it correctly, okay? Because it will require you to be able to visualize for yourself what that geometry is about. So, first things first, almost everyone has seen in a movie or some other TV show a character who will get on their knees or use some other thing, pour salt out, maybe use fire and go in a circle, right? They'll create a circle, and this becomes some kind of mystic barrier. The first thing I want to point out is that when dealing with magic, when actually applying your magic, it is important to feel it, to see it, to imagine it, to recognize it functioning in 3 dimensions. This may sound really silly to you. It really probably might. But far too often we design and construct our magic in 2 dimensions because we take it from books, and books have diagrams, and diagrams are 2-dimensional, and we never actually stop to consider how that would be applied in 3 dimensions, because that's where we're at. That's where we're applying our will. And so what does that look like? How does that feel? Well, with regard to circle magic, it means that most of the time when you see someone drawing a really tiny circle around themselves or something that's really tight to the body, they've already violated that circle or sphere with their body unknowingly. Now, this is because when you draw the circle on the ground, it does not represent some 2-dimensional barrier that, is right there. What it represents is the circumference of your sphere and its diameter, okay? And if you are at its center, then any direction you point from its center would represent the radii of that circle or sphere, specifically the sphere. This immediately allows you as a practicing magician to realize the sensibility of having a 6-foot stave with you. Because most of us, if we were to place that stick at the center of our chest, at our heart, and then touch the other end to the ground and draw a circle around ourselves, if we were to lay down inside that sphere, we would probably have ample room. Now, if that's not the case, and you're really short or something, or perhaps if you're really tall, because that would narrow it, then you could extend your arm out, which is something I do regularly. I like my circles really big. And the reasons for that is because as I visualize it as a sphere, if I were to lay down inside of it and do the little angel thing, like if you were in the sand, say, or in the snow, you want to be doing more than standing with your feet extended to the arc of the inner sphere. You'd like to be able to somehow or another float in the center, which means you need a bit more space. You can't just have it really snug around you. And seriously, it will make a difference. I guarantee you it's going to make a difference. You will be floored at how much more difference this makes it. And of course, you have to make a much larger circle now, right? The more people you include into your circle, then the larger the sphere needs to be to accommodate more than one person standing inside of it. Now, some of you might be like, well, what if we're standing on the points of the circle as if it were you're using a pentagon or a pentacle, right? That's totally different. We're not talking about working magic on the edge or the outside. We're talking about doing it from the inside out. This is stage one. And so at stage one, where you are inside and you are performing your work from inside that sphere, then when you break the edge of the circle, you release your will into the universe and everything that was accumulated inside of that sphere, right? So, and of course, if you're using the sphere as a means of protecting yourself so that you might have uninterrupted meditation or any number of other things, just remember that all of that is contained. Like it goes both ways, and you can make your sphere permeable so that certain things may have entrance to them, right? Just like everything else. So, in a great way to visualize it is how glass operates with light, so that you can have glass which allows light to pass through and allows for an accumulation of energy inside your car, which makes it warm up in the winter, right? And really devastatingly so in the summer. But either way, the glass is permeable, and so it may allow things to pass through, and that again can be reversed so that the permeability is such that the things that are coming from the inside in you then permeate outward. So your inner light, or whatever force you are applying, then can radiate out. And you can turn that on and off with your will based on how you've constructed your sphere, which is built on your circle. So anyway, that's how it begins. Now, the reason this is so important is because this is your sphere scaled downward becomes the point at which all things begin. And if it expanded outward to infinitude, then you would be the all, right? So either way, you are the all, but you are not all of the all. So you are part of it. Just as a cell of your body can lay claim and say, hey, I am, Aubrey. I am Aubrey Forrest, but it can't say I'm all of Aubrey Forrest. I'm just like a skin cell of Aubrey Forrest or a brain cell or something. So, and yet it is still part of me. And I don't consider it anything other than mine, right? All of us, when we think of our hands or our feet, we actually think of them as both part of ourselves and yet separate from ourselves because of the appellations we use, like that's my hands or my feet. So anyway, when building your sphere then becomes, in terms of if you were to scale yourself out from planet Earth and then work our way out to the universe, you are in fact a tiny point. You are in fact a tiny point from which creation then may manifest, or destruction, depending upon what it is that you seek to accomplish, those being two of the most primal and primitive forces that are available to any and all of us at any point in our lives, right? We're both creators and destroyers. Sometimes we destroy to create, and we call that making an omelet. That is the sphere, then, and from that point, you may then extend yourself and your will. And it depends, again, on the permeability of your sphere. This is where imagination gains its foundation from practical, real knowledge of how certain things work, how membranes work. That you can have an osmotic reaction, in other words, osmosis, where the membrane is semi-permeable, allowing certain things to pass through it at a given point, and that those things then could be translated into emotional states or states of being or acts or intent, the focus of your intent. All of those things can be contained and or released as desired through your sphere. And it really comes down again to where you are beginning. What was the initial point of intent when drawing that sphere? And for me, sometimes, and this is also a thing, you can draw more than one circle or sphere circumference around you. So many times what I have done is I will then I'll have an initial sphere because I'm not really sure what I want to do. I haven't got enough focus because there's too much noise in the universe. There's just too much going on. I need to dial it down a little bit so that I can begin to focus and begin to center. So I take my staff and I draw a really nice big circle, and then I sit in the center of that, visualizing my sphere around me and allowing my intent to act for the purpose of muting and muffling all the things which normally are crashing into my psyche at any given moment. And by doing that, it then allows me to focus, and then I can stand up and I can draw another sphere inside of the boundary of the one that I'm already in, which is why you might want to reach outward, bend at the hip a little bit so that there's a lot of room, and then you can actually layer your magic in the same way, right? It's really impressive too. And I just have to say the feeling of it's like hearing it's almost an audible pop when you break 3, 4, or 5 layers of that, where each one represents a certain form of intent, and then you close in, and as it continues to close in, the power begins to build. Definitely, it's a natural. There's like inertia that is overcome as a result of each outer boundary being drawn, and then drawing that in upon yourself. Remember to keep a lot of room. If you're a tall person, like me, you definitely want, to extend that sphere out some distance. It doesn't take any more energy to sustain something that has, a 12-foot diameter as it does to sustain something that has an 8-foot diameter. The difference is that with the 12-foot diameter, if I choose to start coalescing my magic in layer upon layer and then have that released in stages, then that's how I would do that. and as I've said, if you structure your magic like plywood, like nature does, which is by layers, and you like the body is, like the skin is, which is layer upon layer upon layer, designed to protect the body and also execute certain functions. The same can be done with your magic. Just use your knowledge of your environment, of the things which exist that are real, and then apply that to the function of your imagination and the application of your will and your intent as you center within your sphere, within your circle. So your job this week, as you contemplate all this, is to experiment and recognize that you can feel the difference, especially if you draw a really narrow one. The reason why I suggest this, because I've had a lot of people go, well, I'll draw a narrow one and then I'll just have it be a cone or a column, right? The problem is that that's a lot harder to visualize, and how high up are you going to take that? I mean, some are like, well, it just goes on forever. And I'm like, nothing. No, you can't. You can't visualize that. You can visualize a sphere. In fact, with some practice, and if you hold for your benefit, that's why I own a crystal sphere, you hold that in your hands so that you can actually have a visual representation of this is what this looks like. Now I'm just going to make it bigger. Boom. Instant sphere. In my mind, no problem, thanks to the thing on my desk. And that's how to work that. And so seek something out, and it doesn't have to be an actual crystal ball. I mean, if you want, just go out, wherever you go, support local businesses or go online and get yourself some kind of large crystal sphere. By that I mean it should have, at least a 4-inch diameter from side to side, right? You want it to take up the full expanse of your hand, and it might be helpful to have some weight, because that weight can be translated into thickness, into the properties of durability, right? Because we think heavy things are really durable, they're strong, they last forever. Heavy things are often expensive, except for today. Now that's not so much a monicum because, well, anyway, but it used to be heavy things were really expensive. So today we use ultralight materials, but keeping that thought in mind, it allows you then to visualize for yourself the nature and qualities and hardness, the rigidity of the external wall of the external sphere that you're creating. And then you can scale it upwards or downwards based upon what you can visualize in your mind as being harder or softer. So this is circle magic. This is the basic foundation. It is the point of beginning. It's the place that if you do this correctly and your circle, your sphere, because your magic is working in 3 dimensions, it means it goes below your feet and above your head, which means you might need to measure from the top of your head and then extend that outward because of the ground you're standing on, unless you choose to kneel. I'm just saying, pro tip, the bigger your circle, the easier it is to overcome any possible, oh, my head is actually penetrating the height of the sphere. Because if it is, if part of your body is piercing that, then the energy is never contained. It's kind of bled right out. And it might explain to you why so much of your stuff that you might do involving the circle around you isn't working out the way you might think it is or should be. At least so has been my experience until I kind of recognized what my error was, and I started applying this very basic but profound and awesome principle, which is simply to recognize that I'm working my magic in 3 dimensions. So the 2-dimensional diagrams that I'm reading about need to be translated into a 3-dimensional object. There are some exceptions to this, but this is because some other things involve magic which is done externally on the outside of the circle or on its edges, at which point then it might represent something else. So that, and then of course each aspect along the side points would then represent maybe points along its axis, say. So if you happen to have drawn 4 points at the cardinal points, those 4 points would then represent 4 cardinal points in 3-dimensional space. So you can still do that. I'm just like, because I know one of you are like, well, just quickly tell us about working on the outside. And then this also counts for containment spells where you're performing some kind of evocation. All right? And that's why you want to recognize, I guess that's, you just want to recognize that you might need to leave a little room. If you expect something to manifest, even if it's not to your sense of sight, it might require a bit more room, and that could be the reason why nothing's happening. So I'm just saying, as one who has practiced as an exorcist and practiced the art of evocation, and it just, if you have to recognize that the forces that you are seeking to speak with or commune with or participate with, whatever word you wish to insert there, those may require as much space as you do, if not maybe a bit more, to accommodate what they are. I know, magic takes space. Imagine that. So some of it can, in fact, be done in your room, in your house, and this is where other forms of magic come in. Other geometries, like squares, which form a cube, and then that relates to your hexagram, which also forms a cube. Each point on the hexagram representing a point, on the cube. So literally one of the cube points, the corners. So we'll talk about those geometries later, but for now, I want you to begin practicing using a sphere in place of just a circle on the floor when conducting certain meditations or magical performances, and see exactly where it takes you to visualize it as a sphere around yourself rather than just a simple curtain that is circular around yourself that might extend upward or downward like a cylinder, right? So I've had many people say, well, then I turn it at the ends like a Tootsie Pop roll, and I'm like, okay, keep visualizing a Tootsie Pop roll around yourself and do your work, or just to visualize a sphere and do your work. And of course, the way to maintain that visualization and keep a sphere in your hand. Incidentally, performance tip, when doing this, if you do hold a sphere in your hand, it is advisable that the sphere is kept in the left hand, which is where your receptive body, this is actually a coordinated principle between the sphere itself, which in many ways represents this feminine principle, the line, right, being the masculine and the sphere being the feminine. And that's, I'm just thinking right straight up biology again. You know, the ovum is circular, and the spear-like spermatozoa, are entering in, masculine and feminine. We see this everywhere. It's just so amazing. It's just, the repeat of the pattern, especially when you consider the simplicity of its function, is everywhere. And when you understand the utility of understanding a sphere and all the aspects of the sphere, and the sphere can then be modulated to accommodate negative space within itself in the form of the hypertropoid that's in the inside looks like an hourglass. And by doing that, by doing that with your sphere and recognizing that this simple form, which can be seen in an orange or an apple, these are ideas that I've used myself. Holding those in my hand, my left hand, I can receive the impression of what that toroidal shape is like, and I can feel the energy then move in from top to bottom through a filtration system that I've created, allowing myself to be cleansed, to be empowered, to absorb the strength that I might need or desire in order to then direct my will toward a given end. So there you go, guys. I think that this is a good start for our new series in Alchemy Lab. It's going to continue with things like this. We're going to talk about additional geometries, but I want us to work first with the sphere and recognize the importance of the sphere. You can then use this idea and apply it towards the tree of life and visualize for yourself a tree in 3 dimensions, very much like Wang does on the cover of his book, and the Kabbalistic Tarot, and see how each 3-dimensional sphere interacts and then gains properties from the spheres which are adjacent to it, and how that does what it does to each of the spheres, how the path leading to the sphere defines everything that comes after it, and how those paths all begin in Keter and then emerge and break up into 3 separate paths, which we will be talking about later, and how that influences the magic which descends from that. All of those points defined within a sphere. So I just want you to connect that for a second and realize that the qualities and characteristics of each of those spheres can be adopted as a template for interaction within that environment. But you just have to understand that it's not just a circle and it's not just a dome. It goes above you, it goes below you. If you were to lay on your side, you would get the impression of being within a globe that can move and rotate and follow you around if you are able to sustain it through the creation of talismans or tokens or various charms. These are also ways of extending the life of your magic, right, by enchanting items like that. And it's also a great way to make it quick and easy in terms of setting up certain magical environments for yourself. When you already know that if you were to touch a charm or a token or a symbol that you carry with you, that cognitive thought form is acting as a kind of bookmark. So, and that these bookmarks can be embedded into things like candles, matches, lighters, each of which are consecrated for a given end. And so in conclusion, I'm going to give you a brief discussion, since part of creation of a circle is to consecrate it, meaning to set the space within that circle as being unique for a period of time. And that the space then, once that period of time is over, then the activity that was accomplished within the circle is released into the universe at large. So when one wants to consecrate a given activity, and I know this sounds very priestly, and in many ways reveals the path of the alchemist, which is the middle pillar, one is essentially taking it from one state to another. And this doesn't have to be permanent. This can be for the purpose of this activity. That's literally the way to place it in words. So I consecrate this item, insert blank, for the purpose of this activity, and then you describe specifically what it is that you intend to do with it. So that there is no doubt. Flowery language is not part of consecration. That's just complete crap. You are trying to align your will specifically and layer a cognitive construct upon an item that you are carrying. Other items you might be carrying, you can do this to and say indefinitely, or for the life of the item, or for as long as this item is held in my possession. That's something that's nice for things that become sacred implements to you, that you decide, I don't want this to fall out of my possession because I would feel vulnerable or open if I were to lose insert blank, whatever it is an athame or a watch or something that you might keep with yourself as a cognitive thought form that's very personal. So often the best way to use such an item that becomes so personal is to simply indicate until death do us part, or meaning that our relationship is over if I perish or I lose control of this item, then it's divorced from me. It can't be used against me. Either way, I would recommend that you recognize the forces of energy as they extend through your body and are amplified out of your hands, so that your right hand is projective masculine and your left hand is receptive feminine. And this is most easily visualized in just like a knight in armor who has a sword and a shield. Typically the shield is in the left hand because feminine power is resistant and receptive, and masculine power is projective and attractive. So he's trying to stab. Anyway, you know the idea. So when consecrating something, I will hold it in my left hand and use my right hand as the projective force of my intent. So then I would indicate this item that I am now using for this period is being consecrated for this particular purpose. It makes a difference to set items that are used in any form of ritual or ceremonial magic, or any kind of item that is used in any form of personal observance or a devotional time that you are taking to center or structure yourself to create within that sphere a unique environment where nothing exists in that sphere that is not part of what you are doing right now. That's probably the greatest part of it, that anything that is in that sphere is only in there because you want it to be in there. And so the final thing then is just recognizing that simply your will, your intent, creates for you a threshold. So the moment that you complete the drawing of the diameter, the circumference rather, of your sphere, and touch that area with your hand, and depending upon who you are, it might be your hand with a drop of sweat, it might be your hand or fingers with some spit on them, you might have some blood on them. Whatever form that you want to apply, or just simply your will without the application of any physical connection to you, although my experience has been that applying these physical connections, which can be drawn from ourselves, sweat, blood, tears, what have you, these spit, these instruments increase the fortitude of the threshold that you're seeking to create. And so once you pop that up, it literally expels anything that might have been with you at that time. That's simply the function, because nothing that is not you can exist within that sphere. Period. That's just it. And it doesn't require a vast ritual to accomplish this. It just simply recognizes that all this space now represents me. Period. And we now colloquially make fun of this, but it's awesome. We're like, no, personal bubble. And that it's a thing. And the fact that that's actually become so commonplace, this whole idea of personal bubble, and it means that you can draw on all of that. Even the humorous side of the intent, the real intent, the people holding their hand out, going back the hell off, personal bubble, like this is my space. All of that can be applied to that space within you and simply eject anything and everything that is not you or benevolent towards you. So it's one of the reasons why I stopped doing the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. It was not necessary when something so much simpler and so much more effective could be done without all this extra stuff. That's how you do it. So there you go, guys. I've given you a lot here in this time. I hope that if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Keep them, please, centered on this line of dialogue. There's a lot more coming. You need to hear this from someone who does this, from someone who practices it, and know that this is what works for me after having tried so many other things, and these are the reasons why it works, and why other things work, and how you can, and with regard to the whole consecration thing, you can do that by choice either inside or outside. I like to set up the groundwork and get the sphere rolling, and then get everything inside nice and clean and crispy, if you know what I mean. And that can be from simply setting up the sphere and then lighting a candle, and then creating an evocation as a result of the lighting of the candle for benevolent energies and spirits or beings. And then moving from there, because then I'm piggybacking on all that benevolence, right? Then moving from there, I extend further, perhaps incense, perhaps I bring an object into presence. I use something like an athame, or perhaps a wand, or my stave, or nothing, or I just am sitting there. These are all the things that I do that work, and they are definitely a significant component of everything else that I do. This is the foundation. Like from here, I go everywhere else. Everywhere else. It's like Hugh Jackman in that tree sphere in that movie, you know, like that's it. That's you. That's your power, your conveyance through consciousness and what we believe is time because we experience it as cause and effect. So I hope you guys have been excited by this. This has been a lot of fun to talk about, and let me know what your questions might be, or just save them up for the next office hours, and let's talk about spheres and spherical magic there. If I really nailed it for you, please let me know. If this is like, yeah, okay, I got it, you completely explained this, next, I'm ready, then let me know that as well, because that's important. It's important that I know that I've been able to help you understand a really foundational concept which extends literally around everything else and can be a part of everything else. And it's just so important. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I really enjoyed sharing all this with you. I'm Aubrey Forrest, the Modern Alchemist, and this has been Alchemy Lab Rubedo, and we're talking about practical magic in this series, and today we talked about circles spheres, and magic.